Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to deliver a presentation on the topic Impact of Inflation on Poverty. First of all, we will start by what is inflation? Inflation refers to the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, leading to a decrease in the purchasing power of a currency. Inflation can be caused by various factors, including demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, and monetary factors. There are various effects of inflation, such as reduced purchasing power, uncertainty, and higher interest rates. The briefings can be carried on as reduced purchasing power. As prices rise, the same amount of money buys fewer goods and services, so that reducing consumers' purchasing power. Uncertainty in business. High inflation rates can create uncertainty for businesses and consumers, affecting investment and spending decisions. And lastly, higher interest rates. Central banks may respond to inflation by raising interest rates to control spending and reduce inflation's pressures that impact borrowing costs for business. After inflation, let's move on to poverty. So, what is poverty? Poverty is a condition characterized by a lack of resources to survive. Poverty is a complex condition characterized by the inability to afford basic necessities. It encompasses various dimensions, including economic, social, and political aspects. Now, moving on to the dimensions of poverty. Income poverty is where households lack income to meet their needs. Multidimensional poverty extends beyond income to include a lack in systemic issues such as of access to goods, structure inequality, rooted unequal distribution of wealth. Finally, moving on to the effects of poverty, which are health impacts. Poverty is closely linked to poor health outcomes, educational barriers. Poverty often limits access to education, such as lack of resources for school fees. Social exclusion. Social discrimination can occur, limiting in social, economic, and political life. As we have discussed about what inflation and poverty is, let's see what interconnects them. Some of the factors are listed on the screen. Let's carry on with the briefings. Purchasing power erosion. Inflation diminishes the buying power of money, making it harder for the impoverished to afford essentials, perpetuating poverty. Vicious cycle. Poverty can contribute to inflation by reducing demand, potentially leading to economic stagnation and inflationary pressures. Income inequality. Inflation disproportionately affects the poor, widening the wealth gap as the affluent can better withstand rising prices. Cost of living. Inflation increases living expenses, straining low income budgets and potentially pushing more people into poverty. Access to credit. High inflation limits access to credit, hindering the poor's ability to cover essential expenses and escape poverty. Social stability. Persistent poverty driven by inflation can lead to social unrest and disrupt economic activities, perpetuating the cycle. Policy challenges. Addressing both issues require nuanced policies, balancing price stability with poverty reduction, posing challenges for policymakers. Lastly, global impact. Inflation and poverty have global ramifications with economic events in one region affecting prices and poverty levels elsewhere.
Understanding inflation. So, when we talk about inflation, we are essentially looking at why prices in the economy are going up and what happens as a result. There are a couple of main reasons for this. One is what we call demand pull inflation. It occurs when aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply. Let's learn about its causes. Increase in consumer spending. When consumers have more disposable income due to factors like rising wages, low interest rates, or tax cuts, they tend to increase their spending on goods and services, lending to higher demand. Investment and government spending. Increased investment by businesses or higher government spending on infrastructure, healthcare, or defense can also boost aggregate demand, contributing to demand pull inflation. Monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policies such as lowering interest rates or increasing the money supply can stimulate borrowing and spending, further driving up demand for goods and services. Let's learn about its effects. Demand pull inflation typically leads to higher prices and can result in overheating of the economy if production capacity cannot keep pace with rising demand. It may also erode the purchasing power of money over time, leading to a decrease in real income for customers. The other major cause is cost push inflation. It results from increased production costs for businesses. This is when it costs more for businesses to make their products, so they end up charging us more. Let's learn about its causes. Rising production cost. Factors such as increases in wages, raw material prices, energy costs, or taxes can raise the cost of production for businesses. As a result, firms may pass on these higher costs to consumers in the form of higher prices. Supply shocks. Events like natural disasters, geopolitical conflicts, or disruptions in the supply chain can cause sudden reductions in the supply of key goods or resources, leading to scarcity and higher prices. Imported inflation. Cost push inflation can also occur due to increase in the prices of imported goods and commodities which affect domestic production costs and contribute to overall inflation. Let's learn about its effects. Cost push inflation can lead to reduced purchasing power for consumers and businesses as higher prices erode real incomes and profit margins. It can also create uncertainty and volatility in the economy, making it challenging for businesses to plan and invest. Consequences of inflation. Now, when inflation happens, it affects different parts of the economy in different ways. During inflation, our purchasing power goes down, so we can't buy as much with the same amount of money. Plus, inflation can mess with things like loans and savings, which can hit some of us harder than others. Businesses also feel the pinch when their costs go up. They might have to raise prices, which could turn customers away. Governments all have to deal with inflation too. It can mess with their budgets, making it harder to pay off debts or fund important programs. Inflation can also slow down the economy, even lead to job losses. Poverty dynamics. So, shifting our focus to poverty, it's a complex issue that goes beyond just not having enough money. There are different ways to measure it. Let's delve into it. Absolute poverty line represents the minimum level of income or consumption needed for basic needs. It's the cost of essential things like food, shelter, and healthcare. For example, the World Bank often uses a global poverty line of $1.90 per day to define extreme poverty. Relative poverty line defines poverty in relation to the overall income distribution within a society. For instance, in the European Union, relative poverty might mean living on less than 60% of the median income. Subjective poverty threshold based on individuals' perceptions of their own economic situation. It's about how people themselves see their situation. Surveys might ask questions like: do you struggle to afford food? Or do you worry about paying your bills? It gives us a more defined view of poverty, taking into account people's own experiences and perceptions. Multidimensional aspects of poverty. Poverty isn't just about money, it's about a lot of other things too, like education, health, and access to basic services. Let's break it down. Income. If someone has a decent income, they might still be struggling if they don't have access to other things like education or healthcare. Education. Education is key. Without it, people can get stuck in a cycle of poverty. If kids can't go to school, they are less likely to get good jobs and break out of poverty. Health. Poor health can trap people in poverty too. If someone's sick all the time or can't afford medical care, it's hard for them to work and support themselves. Access to basic services. Things like clean water, housing, and transportation might seem basic, but they are essential for a decent quality of life. Without them, people can struggle to stay healthy, find work, or even just get by day to day.
Vulnerable populations. Introduction. Inflation exacerbates poverty among vulnerable populations by eroding their purchasing power, making basic necessities less affordable and limiting economic opportunities. List of vulnerable populations, which may include but not be limited to low income families, unemployed or underemployed individuals, homeless individuals, those living in poverty or near the poverty line. Low income families. Limited financial resources. Low income families often have limited financial resources and rely on budgeting tightly to meet their basic needs. Significant strains in budgets. Inflation can significantly strain their budgets as the prices of essential goods and services rise, making it more difficult for them to afford necessities such as food, housing, and healthcare. Limited savings. Limited access to savings or financial buffers means that low income families may struggle to absorb the increased cost associated with inflation. Ways to control inflation. Policy measures targeting inflation and supporting low-income families, such as minimum wage adjustments, targeted subsidies, and access to affordable housing, are crucial in alleviating the economic burden on this vulnerable group. Unemployed or underemployed individuals. Lack of regular income. Unemployed individuals are already facing financial hardship due to the lack of regular income from employment, low wage rate. Underemployed individuals may have jobs that do not provide sufficient hours or wages to meet their financial needs. Rising prices. Rising prices can lead to difficult trade-offs for these individuals, such as prioritizing spending on basic needs over investing in education or skills development to improve their employment prospects. Adequate support system. Without adequate support systems or social safety nets, unemployed or underemployed individuals may be at greater risk of falling into poverty or experience prolonged periods of economic instability. Homeless individuals. Unstable housing facility. Homeless individuals face extreme economic vulnerability, often lacking stable housing and basic amenities. Increasing cost of essential goods. Inflation exacerbates the challenges faced by homeless individuals by increasing the cost of essential goods and services, including food, clothing, and healthcare. Limited financial resources. Limited access to financial resources means that homeless individuals are particularly susceptible to the adverse effect of inflation, as they may rely heavily on charitable assistance or government support programs to meet their basic needs. Insecure and unstable housing. Rising housing costs can make it even more difficult for homeless individuals to secure stable housing or access affordable shelter options, perpetuating cycles of homelessness and economic instability. Those living in poverty or near the poverty line. Economic challenges. Individuals and families living in poverty or near the poverty line already face significant economic challenges, often struggling to afford basic necessities. Inflation disproportionately. Inflation disproportionately affects this group as they spend a larger portion of their income on essentials such as food, housing, and healthcare. Price hike. Even small increases in prices can have a substantial impact on the purchasing power of individuals living in poverty, pushing them further into financial hardship. Vulnerable to economic shocks. Vulnerable to economic shocks, those living in poverty or near the poverty line may lack the financial resilience to cope with the rising cost of living during inflationary periods. Inflation in Pakistan. Current situation. Pakistan has experienced persistent inflationary pressures in recent years, with inflation rates fluctuating due to various factors. Factors driving inflation: increase in food prices. Increase in food prices due to supply chain disruptions and weather related events. Rising energy costs. Rising energy costs, including electricity and fuel prices. Exchange rate fluctuations. Exchange rate fluctuations impacting the price of imported goods. Monetary policy. Monetary policy decisions and government fiscal measures.
So, as we know, poverty induced inflation creates a difficult situation where rising prices hurts the poorest the most. So, here are some long term solutions to reduce inflation induced poverty. So, number one is sustainable economic growth. When an economy grows steadily, it creates more opportunities, new businesses emerge, existing ones expand, and this translates to job creation. So, with more jobs available, wages tend to rise, lifting people out of poverty and giving them a buffer against inflation. Then we can improve agriculture productivity. So, we can invest in agriculture research, irrigation system, and access to fertilizer and better seeds. This will increase food production, making it more affordable for low income families. Then we can implement social safety programs like targeted cash transfers, food stamps, or subsidized public housing. So these programs directly help low income families afford basic necessities and reducing their vulnerability to inflation. Then we have financial inclusion. Increase access to financial services for low income individuals. This allows them to save money and manage their finances better and weather price fluctuations. Then we can invest in education. As we all know, education is a powerful tool for poverty reduction as it equips individuals with the skills and knowledge necessary to secure better paying jobs and participate effectively in the economy. Investing in education, particularly in marginalized community, improve access to quality education and enhances economic opportunity for disadvantaged groups. Then we can invest in healthcare, as investing in healthcare infrastructure, preventive care, and healthcare services ensures that individuals can access essential medical services without financial hardship. Then we can also promote competition, like encouraging competition in markets to prevent businesses from exploiting price hikes during inflation. This protects consumers, especially low income families, from unfair price rise. So these are some solutions which take time and commitment, but by focusing only on these long term strategies, a society can build a stronger foundation, empowering individuals, creating a more equitable distribution of resources. Now we know that poverty often breeds a cycle of vulnerability to inflation. So there are some comprehensive examples of policies which can be implemented to break this cycle. So the number one policy can be targeted wage subsidies. So these subsidies can incentivize business to create jobs, pay decent wages, boosting income for low wage earners while not excessively stimulating inflation. Then we can implement progressive taxation, like taxing high income earners at a higher rate allows for investment in social safety nets like food stamps or subsidized housing, and directly helping low income families afford basic necessities during inflation. Then we can also implement price control. Temporary price controls on essential goods can provide immediate relief during periods of high inflation, but these need to be carefully implemented to avoid shortages. So now, as to conclude this topic, we know that inflation burdens low-income households, and as prices rise, essential goods and services become less affordable, squeezing the already tight budgets of those living on the margin. This can lead to difficult choices between basic necessities like food and shelter, healthcare, and education. But by focusing on these long term strategies, a society can build a stronger foundation, empowering individuals and creating a more equitable distribution of resources. This makes everyone, especially the most vulnerable, less susceptible to the harsh realities of inflation induced poverty. Thank you.